Meet Adam Reakes, a Division I assistant coach on the path to change the culture of football. Born from Colchester, England, football became his passion. At a young age, he moved to the States, playing in college and later for multiple semi-professional clubs. In this video, we will learn about his 10-year experience coaching at the top level, uncover the problems with American soccer, and understand what it really takes to become a successful coach. What was life like growing up for you?
My dad was in the military, my mum was in the police. He played sort of pro and part-time. He played in Germany, he played in Hong Kong, played all around the world, played for the army, coached for the army. The British Army has their own team that plays at semi-competitive, pretty decent levels, and manage it as my older brother, who's 9 years older than me, started to play at a serious level as well. And so that's kind of where my fascination and obsession with the game came from. I was around it pretty much every weekend. There wasn't much Saturdays that I wasn't stood behind the dugout or in the stands or behind a goal. I was always around it, and I think that being around that environment at such a young age, you see all these like older men, they're swearing and spitting, and I think it bit on me early, and I just sort of fell in love with that environment. I was a multi-sport kid. I played pretty much everything: rugby, cricket, football, basketball, pretty into judo for a while, till I got to around 14 and focused in on just football.
Is there anyone else that really inspired you growing up?
You know, my brother was everything that I wasn't, in that he was always really effortlessly academic, good grades, and just kind of being very composed and not being the kid that got in trouble or did anything stupid. Having an older brother who's been there and seen it, he was able to give me a more down-to-earth view. I would say living up to his example was something that I think when I got to my teenage years was something that really helped me, thus inspired me a little bit. So I think I had a couple of physical education teachers at school. I was really sport-driven. Rather than make life harder for me, they made life easier. They were like, this is who Adam is. He's sport-driven, he's competitive-driven. In Chattanooga for Chattanooga FC, one of the biggest achievements was being part of a team that went to the national championship game in 2015. And I don't think at the time I really realised how special of a group it was. I think I was quite selfish at the time. I was very self-driven. But looking back on it, it was a really, really special group of guys, and attract somewhere in the realm of 18,000 fans, an NPSL national championship game, which I think is, it was really breathtaking stuff. And then as a coach, I was lucky enough last year to begin my first ever season for an NPSL team in Georgia. To start that program from scratch was something that I think I'm really proud of, because the group there were good, they really worked hard, but they gave me the free rein to say, look, put us on the map. And my biggest disappointment for me is that I didn't push myself earlier in my career. I think I continued my playing career for a long time and don't necessarily regret that, but part of me wishes I'd have got into the college game a little bit sooner. I find myself really enjoying it, and I just wish I was doing it. I should have been doing it for a lot longer.
How was your experience playing in the States versus the UK?
I think football in England is at a point where it's a necessity, it's culturally significant. It's part of most people's weekends, whether it be playing, like it is fully part of what everyone does on weekends. It is almost like a religion. I don't think we have that quite in America yet. Here, it is a higher economic level sport. I think in England, it is more on the flip side. It is a working class, lower economic scale connection of sport. People who do not earn a lot of money, that's how they're connected to their city. That's how they're connected to their hometown. That's how they're connected to their friends. That's how they're connected to each other. We don't have that here. I spend a lot of time in Atlanta. You go to an Atlanta United game, it's a fantastic experience in terms of like the things that are offered in that stadium and how the games are situated. And so guys go and they have a beer and they have food and they go to see their friends. And so they're starting to get that like mesh of it. It's starting to come on. I think back to my time in Chattanooga, it was a really unique experience to have a 4th division club in America, 2,000, 3,000 at home games. That experience was really unique. Most players in my level would never be able to find. I think the difference is that geographically, there are a lot more people in Chattanooga, Tennessee than there are in certain towns in England, and practically each town in England has a team. That's why the big clubs are so rare. When we played New Orleans away, when I was at Chattanooga, it was us and them competing for the title, and we ended up winning the game away at the Pan Am Stadium in New Orleans, 2-1. We were celebrating as we were sort of clapping them and singing with them and stuff like that. Just a hail of beer cans that were just thrown at us from this group of like 25, 30 drunk New Orleans fans who were kind of annoyed that they'd lost the kind of close game. And we kind of had a laugh about that being covered in beer, and thought it was quite funny. It's like, man, you don't expect this in NPSL. Then you get into the locker rooms and there's like 1 or maybe 2 showers, and they're like behind the locked gate. And so we have to find someone to come and open this gate so we can have a shower before we go back to the hotel. And the guys are all like huffing and puffing. The staff are like, oh yeah, I think he's got the key. Oh, I think they've got the keys. Then they get open and there's absolutely no hot water. The rules back then were you feed the away team in their locker rooms. Typically you give them some pizzas or some local food, and kind of there was like a team of 30 that were there and there was like 4 pizzas to feed us all. It was just kind of a nuts environment. I kind of thought we'd seen it all and been involved in it all in terms of facilities, and that was one that we were just like, didn't think that we'd go to New Orleans and have this experience, but it was just one that we got on the bus and we laughed about and thought about for the rest of that season. It was a fun one.
Originally, you played for them, right? Was that like a surreal experience?
My main coaching aspect was working with advanced development programs. So it's just local kids who were maybe a little bit better than their local clubs and wanted to get some advanced coaching, as well as with, at the time, they had a women's team. So I was kind of shadowing their women's team. I was, 19. I was about to move over to America. So I was just really getting started. A little bit surreal, but it was fun, really enjoyable. Great kind of way to cut my teeth in the game and get that coaching experience at a young age and be like, oh, okay, this is how coaches act.
You had an internship with Reinhardt University. You actually played there originally. How was your experience with them?
Yeah, I played there. I graduated from there. Joey Johnson was the coach. And so I interned as the assistant coach and really wanted to give my time to Joey as much as I possibly could. Giving back to that program just meant the world to me. I think that experience for me was vital.
And then after that year, you went back to Georgia with Atlanta FC, right? How was that?
I was a director of coaching there, part of the leadership of the club, not just learning, but also now implementing and trying to be a leader of the club and move the club forward. Each director is overrunning, maybe 50 to 60 coaches and 50 to 60 teams and a couple of hundred players that you're interacting with on a weekly basis. And so it was difficult.
And what was like a typical day over there? Like a typical Tuesday or Monday or game day? What did it look like for you in terms of your schedule?
I mean, Mondays were typically a staff meeting day. That was where we'd get ready for the week ahead, review the weekend before. And then a lot of that would be communicating with each other and communicating with the league, the clubs. Leading up to game day would be actually quite a lot of manual labor, like just stuff that you really don't think about needing to get done, like putting the benches out, putting the goals in place, putting the corner flags out, things like that people don't think about. Like that's actually part of our job as well. We do a lot of like meetings and running around and discussing numbers and discussing tactics. But actually at that level, we've got to move goals, we've got to get fields line, floodlights turned on and turned off and things like that. So
I saw you hosted Toronto FC over there. So is there any other pros that had a big impact on you?
The Toronto thing was a great experience, getting to watch them train before they played Atlanta United, and that was a great experience. Greg Vanny was great with me. Got to meet Montreal Impact last year. But in terms of impact, Jack Collison. Jack played professionally in England for West Ham. He's played in the Premier League. He represented Wales internationally, has played big international games for Wales. He had serious injuries which cut his career short, but he could still play at a fantastic level. I think I went over twice to watch him train the Atlanta United 2s, one pre-game day and one post-game day training session, and he was just so humble and welcoming, and is at the stage of the coaching career that he's at to be that open with me. And he didn't have to do that, but he did it, and it really helped me.
And then the last thing from me, he always said, if you play for the badge on the front, they'll remember the name on the back of the shirt.
Okay, so after that, you did the Georgia Revoultion and then Apotheos FC.
They're a smaller club, family owned and operated, and from a coaching aspect, there was a lot of different challenges there, but a really good time. We had a successful season, and I kind of took a lot of that into Apotheos. Apotheos, I think, as I mentioned before, was a first-year program. Our biggest challenge was, can we find the right intangibles to get a team on the field for the first time ever and be competitive? They've never seen an Apotheos game before. They don't know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting challenge.
After that, you moved to Nova Southeastern in Florida. You had a full season with them, so I didn't know how it really went for you personally.
The opportunity came up to work with Matt Watts down at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he took a chance on me. I'm sure he had a bunch of people applying for that job that were already in the college game and had college resumes that maybe looked better than mine. I really enjoyed my time down there. Division II school, great facilities, great location, probably the most competitive conference in Division II. Really tough games, really, really tough opponents and tough coaches. We had a really good team and probably just didn't quite get enough over the line to be super successful and win silverware. And so super grateful for my time there. Me and my wife, we now have our 3-week-old daughter, so we're at newborn stage right now. And
congrats.
We were expecting, thank you. We're expecting her. Fort Lauderdale was a really great place, but a tough place to raise a family. And the Wofford job came up, and it's been great for us so far. It's Division I school, small Division I school, private school. So far, it's been a fantastic move, one I really am glad I made.
What do you think is your favorite formation or is the best formation to you?
That's a really tough question. I am of the coaching theory that there are many ways to play. There are in-possession shapes and out-of-possession shapes, and I think that formations are going away. For example, what Pep Guardiola did this year, if you look at what De Zerbi did with Brighton this year, I think shapes, it is no longer 4-3-3. That might be what they look like in some parts of the game. I think what I try and do in my kind of small philosophy token is that I like to expand with width. I like to keep teams pinned back wide. And then from there, I'm kind of opponent driven. A lot of what I try and do is pick teams apart. My philosophy and how I want the team to look and how I want to play kind of comes secondary to the result for me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I throw it forward and we just hope for the best. But if there was a way that we've played for the last 2 weeks, by changing that drastically would mean we might win on this next week, I'm not opposed to doing it. I'll probably likely do it because the result for me is the most important thing. And so effective shape, whatever that may be, is probably what I would look to do.
I know you went to Rome in Italy, right? How often do you scout players as a coach? Is it more for the assistant coach versus the head coach?
Recruiting is massive. In the college game, you can be a very, very okay coach and a very, very good recruiter, and you will have a good team. Recruiting is huge. We don't have at the collegiate level or the lower levels scouting networks to send around everywhere that will do your bidding for you. It's on you as the coach. You are recruiting. So it's huge, man. I was fortunate enough with Nova last year to try and help them to go through Europe, to Rome, Sweden, Norway, throughout England, to showcases and work with agencies to try and get looks at players, and then also going to showcases here in the USA. Assistant coaches typically take the bulk of the recruitment trips, but there are a lot of hands-on head coaches out there that will do all of the recruiting on their own because they want to see the player more.
Is coaching based on contracts? And if it is based on contracts, like how long do contracts last, or does it like really depend on what league, team, club you're playing on?
Contracts, 100%. At the club level, you'll probably find that they're like yearly contracts, rolling contracts, where the club holds all the cards or the person holds a lot of the cards. And so I think for most assistant coaches, you are on a rolling year contract. But I think head coaches is very similar to the pros in that you have a yearly term on your contracts, 3 years, the next 2 years, the next 4 years, or the next 6 years, whatever it might be.
So right now, what is your favorite versus least favorite part of your typical week or day?
Of course, we get into coaching because we love coaching, we love being on the field, and that's probably my most favorite part is game days and training days when we're on the field and we get to compete and improve, all of those types of things. So I love that part of the job. I wouldn't say I dislike meetings or the business part. I love recruiting. I think that probably recruiting falls second behind kind of the soccer side of things. Maybe the really toughest part that I dislike is having any disciplinary or difficult conversations with players. I think difficult conversations with players are important, but it's not necessarily my favorite part of the job.
So if you want to give me 5 of your favorite drills in general that most teams, if not all teams, should be doing.
Number 1, directional rondos. Small-sided games that focus on directional possession. You can just do a rondo square, 5v2, no problem. That's a great warm-up exercise, gets the blood flowing, whatever. As part of your training exercise, if you can find a directional rondo or a directional small-sided game that can come with an outcome, that is 100% a really good aspect of training. Number 2, I think, is transitional games. Transitional parts are becoming vitally important. Teams will look to counter-attack. Teams will be open to the counter-attack. Transitional parts of the game are really, really vital. So 3v2s, 3v3s, 2v1s, and with consequences for the counter-attacking team that may lose the ball. Maybe there's a consequence of the opposite team have a way of scoring or whatever it might be. 3 would be, I want to try and avoid using the word structured, but structured finishing. So finishing sessions that have structured runs. Explain to your players that you need to make this run and time it at this point to get onto the end of this type of cross is really, really important. I think it scores you goals if you're able to get on the same page with your players as to what you will look like at the final third. Structured and patterned finishing is really vital to the top level. 4, I would say defensive shape work. It's boring. It's not great. The great coaches out there have ways of making it more enjoyable and more challenging by throwing up different scenarios. So it's not just the ball's here, what do we all look like? The ball's over here, what do we all look like? Positional defending and pattern work, I think, is really important. Then 5, I think, is some form of small-sided game or 11v11 if the position calls for it. You've got to let it flow. You've got to let them enjoy that part of the training session. And I think it's just really important that players get to compete every day as well.
So the next one is 3 things that every coach looks for when they're scouting.
I think positional understanding is vital. Like if we're looking to recruit you at centre back and you're too high, you're too deep, you're not getting tight enough to the striker, you can have all the athletic and technical ability in the world. confident. I can work with a player on touch. We can even maybe see around a player not having the full athletic capabilities or strengths that's needed. But if they don't have any kind of understanding of positional sense, I think that's a real red flag. I think 2, we're looking for character. And that's such an easy word to throw around, but we're looking for players who are leaders, that want to win. If you don't want to win in your under 18s team or your high school team, then why would I put you in my team where you're not going to want to win for my team and for my players? The will to win is massive. And then 3rd, I think, is academics. And I would maybe put that in with a bracket of academics. Can you be smart? Can you make sure you get it done in the classroom? But also, are you a good person off the field? Like, I don't want to recruit a person who in the locker room is just going to cause so many arguments with the rest of my team. Same with the pro game, right? You want someone who's going to be on board, not going to be a big timer guy that comes in with all of the flashy clothes and cars and stuff and can't have a conversation with their teammates. And so I think probably those are the 3 biggest aspects.
3 aspects that most coaches overlook or underestimate.
So 1, I would say, is psychology, looking after the player. A lot of coaches will put players in a room. These are all good players. I haven't got to do anything else other than train them and tell them what formation to play and how to play, and everything's going to work itself out. That takes time. You need to have meetings. You need to speak to your players. You need to make connections and relationships with your players. Second aspect would be feedback and being open to feedback. Let players give you feedback on what you're doing and take it with a grain of salt, but listen. It makes a massive difference if you can take feedback and listen to what players are telling you. It doesn't mean they're always right, but it does mean that you are in the right for listening to them. And then the last piece would probably be humility. Coaches can sometimes win a few games, have a great season, whatever it might be, win a piece of silverware, create a good program, and suddenly they put themselves on this high pedestal. When they lose one game or they have a bad run, they don't know how to react to it, and they need to go back to their roots a little bit and figure out, what was I like when I first started out and I wasn't this successful? It would be to keep going. Keep going. It would keep going. So many roadblocks are going to be thrown in your way as a coach. So many roadblocks. So many people, so many paperwork, documents you don't have, licenses you don't have. You got to keep going. If you want to make it in this industry, it's a tough industry. If you want to make it, and I haven't made it, I'm not saying I've made it, but people want to get to the next level. They want to do this next thing. You've got to keep going. Persistence is key.
In the future, in 5 or 10 years, where do you see yourself? Is there like a dream job that you want to hit?
I'll tell you this right now. I'd love to be Tottenham Hotspur manager, and I'd love to be the England manager. But to get there, I have to just take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm really wanting to be happy in being the next step. The next step for me right now is to get into a head coach's job in the college game. And then from there, I'll figure out what the next step is for me. After that, is it assistant coach in the MLS? Right now, I'll focus on doing the best job I possibly can in my current role. I try and focus and keep it one step at a time.
A massive thank you to Adam, as I wish you the best in your coaching career. And please drop a like on the video, because if it wasn't for him, this video wouldn't be possible. But if you want to see how I performed as a coach, I just made a video where I managed my former high school team for an entire week.